All right. So we are in Deuteronomy. We're hitting the Ten Commandments today. We're not going to get all of them. We'll get most of or the first part today. Again, the reason that we're going through Deuteronomy is as we were leading up to Easter and going over some of the teachings of Jesus and things like that, and we kind of saw the big picture. If you remember, about 6 weeks before Easter, we started in Genesis and kind of moved through how everything was leading to the cross and the resurrection. And one thing that we heard Jesus say many times is he talked about the law and the prophets and about obedience and living the way that God has called us to live. Well, what would he have been talking about then? Would he have been talking about the rules that we have created today in our churches on how you're supposed to live? No, he was talking about the Torah, right? He was talking about the Old Testament. That's what he was talking about. That got me thinking, you know what, let's hit Deuteronomy, because Deuteronomy is kind of a summary. Remember, the people are now, they have wandered in the desert for 40 years because they were not trusting and faithful to cross into the Jordan. And remember, we've talked about how last week we talked about that's kind of where I feel that we are. As a society and individuals, we're kind of wandering in the desert. I don't know if we've just started or if we're coming to the end. I don't know, but we are wandering, right? And during that time of wandering, you would have had people who had chosen to disregard what God had said, and then you would have had people who were trying to implore them to do what God had said. But guess what? They still get stuck in the wilderness too. Right? And they're all in it together. And we're back, and Moses is recounting all of that, and he's trying to instill in the people again what is important, who God is, what he has called you to be, who you are in relationship with him. And not only is he speaking on an individual basis, that each person needs to do this, it's also the society, and that only makes sense that God would care about how you live your life, but also how society interacts. What does God desire? He desires what is good for his creation, especially humanity, right? He created us in his image, so he desires for us to treat each other well. He desires for us to do good and not evil. Well, whenever you kind of scan back and you get a big picture, that means societies as a whole have the most impact on whether good and evil happen in a society, right? And so you're looking at that, and God is calling this people group so that they can be a model of how a society should function under God. Right? And so Israel is making this commitment that they are going to do that. They are going to follow God. The thing we find out about God is that if you're going to make a commitment with him, then you better make a commitment, right? Because he's always going to hold up his end of the deal. But if you do not, there will be consequences to pay. And now other nations do that as well. Other societies, that happens as well. If they do not make that commitment, they will pay the price also. But there's something different whenever you say you're going to, and then you don't, right? And God is very clear about that, and Moses is being very clear about that. So I want to read just a little bit. We're going to be in chapter 4, starting in verse 15. And then another little part in chapter 4 before we get to the Ten Commandments. But I want you to put yourself in, I don't know, maybe Moses is kind of up, I'm sure, on a rise, and he's talking to the people. Put yourself there. You're listening to Moses. You've been wandering now for 40 years, right? Maybe you've only been wandering for 20, all right? You were born somewhere in the middle, right? So, which is interesting. So you actually didn't experience Egypt. You're now relying on that being told to you, right? So all of these wonderful things that you've heard about God, you actually didn't experience them, but you've been hearing about it on and on. And so now you're sitting here listening to Moses, and you can look to your right and you can see the Jordan River, and you can see that the land on the other side that God has promised. Right? And so you're listening intently to these words because something big is about to happen. Right? And Moses is laying all of it out. And in verse 15 of chapter 4, he says, "You saw no form of any kind the day the Lord spoke to you at Horeb out of the fire. Therefore, watch yourselves very carefully so that you do not become corrupt and make for yourselves an idol, an image of any shape, whether formed like a man or a woman or like an animal on the earth or any bird that flies in the air or like any creature that moves along the ground or fish in the waters below. And when you look up into the sky and see the sun, the moon, and the stars, all the heavenly array, do not be enticed into bowing down to them and worshiping things the Lord your God has apportioned to all the nations under heaven. But as for you, the Lord took you and brought you out of the iron smelting furnace out of Egypt to be the people of his inheritance as you are now." Right? So God is speaking, and he's saying, please stay focused on me. Do not turn to something else. Do not create an idol. And you may think, why? Why would we want to create an idol that we know is created rather than worshiping the creator of the universe, the creator of the heavens and the earth, the stars above us? Why would we be so stupid? Because we are, right? Because we forget the order of things. The order of things is God. Then it's us. And the reality is all of us, we have, because we live in this fallen world, and you can call it sin nature, you can call it whatever it is, but we have this desire that we don't like our place in that order. And you know what? We would like to be up there. But it's this weird thing because we were also created to worship God, right? Whether you acknowledge it or not, you were. So we have this weird thing that happens to us that even whenever we choose, you know what, I'm going to be God, not God. We actually create other religions. We actually create other idols because we know there should be something that we acknowledge is bigger than us. But you know what? If we're the ones that create it, who's really the one that's in charge? It's me, even though I worship this golden calf. Right? So it's this interesting thing, an idol, and whenever we worship other things, we are worshiping ourselves. We are putting ourselves in place of God. That is at the heart of it. And that can take many different forms, but that is what we're doing. And God and Moses is talking to the people, and he's telling them, you have to stay focused on the one who created you. And then I love this. Oops, page turn. It's always hard as a pastor. All right, verse 32, chapter 4. Ask now about the former days, long before your time, from the day God created human beings on the earth. Ask from one end of the heavens to the other, has anything so great as this ever happened? Or has anything like it been heard of before? Has any other people heard the voice of God speaking out of fire as you have and lived? Has any God ever tried to take for himself one nation out of another nation by testings, by signs and wonders, by war, by a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, or by the great and awesome deeds, like all the things the Lord your God did for you in Egypt before your very eyes? You were shown these things so that you might know that the Lord is God. Besides him, there is no other. From heaven, he made you hear his voice to discipline you. On earth, he showed you his great fire, and you heard from his words from out of the fire, because he loved your ancestors and chose their descendants after them. He brought you out of Egypt by his presence and his great strength, to drive out before you nations greater and stronger than you, and to bring you into their land. and to give it to you for your inheritance as it is today. Acknowledge and take to heart this day that the Lord is God in heaven above and on earth below. There is no other. Keep his decrees and his commands, which I am giving you today, so that it may go well with you and your children after you, and that they may live long in the land that the Lord your God gives you for all time. Wow. And it's powerful. What is it that God wants for us? Right? So often what our society has done is we focus on a God who gives us all these rules to follow. And we're like, oh man, what a jerk. He just doesn't like us to have fun. He doesn't want us to do stuff. He just gives us all these commands. But then you read that and it's very clear. The commands are in there. He's like, I'm about to give you all of these commands. Why? So that it will go well for you and your children and the children after them and the children after them. That is what God desires. See, God is not a God who deals in a utopian fictional world. Right? He knows that there are boundaries and that there are limits and there are right ways to live and that there are wrong ways to live. And so he's going to actually tell us the right way. You know what is the wrong way? It's what our society says, is just do what you want. That you create your own truth. So therefore, you find your own path, whatever that path may be. And if you just stay to that path that you've created, it will go well for you. That is a lie. That is not true. And it is designed to lead you literally to hell, but also so that it will not go well for you. Right? It's not just that it leads away from God and eternal separation from God. It actually leads to chaos in this life today. God is not a God of chaos. There is nothing more chaotic than a society telling people to follow their truth and find who you are. You better be finding who you are in Jesus Christ. If you find who you are in your own mind and your own understanding, look at what happens to that. We literally have things that you can fill out where you can choose one of 50 different genders or identities that you have. That literally is happening. It doesn't make sense. Except when you choose to start believing that we are God and not God himself. What does that mean? That means there's 8 billion gods in the world. That's chaotic. Right? So God is sitting there and Moses is telling the people that God has told the people, God spoke to the people, and he's told them, just remember who I am. Don't go after these other idols and gods. Keep your focus on me because I want what is best for you. And yeah, that means there's going to be some commands. Now, I'm going to start out really hard. I'm going to give you 10. You think you can do it? And the answer is no, we can't. I need more simple than that. But God desires for it to go well for us. Right? That is why he gives his commands. That is why he calls us to obey and to listen. All right, so then you get into the 10 commandments. And this, again, you can read in Exodus of when God gave the 10 commandments. They're the first time. This is now Moses sharing again what has been said. And he starts off, this is in verse 6, and he said, I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. All right, let's just stay there. And you can just keep the scripture up, and I'm going to kind of talk and do whatever. But hardest job, the guy that has to follow. It's a guy today. Many times it's Danielle. And so, as I stop here because we don't consider this the first commandment, right? But this is really interesting. So I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. So one, it does establish very quickly, I am the Lord your God. How often are you hearing that theme in this first part of Deuteronomy? And the first 4 commandments are basically, I am the Lord your God. Acknowledge that. Okay, and so there's that aspect, but then there's this remember that I brought you out of slavery, that I brought you out of Egypt. Why was that important for them to remember? So that they would be grateful and they would have gratitude. It's a recognition of 2 things. One, that God is greater than us and that he wants it to go well for us, that he wants to free us from the bonds of slavery. Right? That gives you an attitude. Gosh, I hate this phrase. That gives you an attitude of gratitude. Right? That's so cliche, and it's been written on there. I can picture coffee mugs with the attitude of gratitude, right? But having a heart of gratitude is vital. We do not recognize how, I think we diminish how important that is. If you are not grateful, then you are going to make yourself God very quickly. Because being grateful, you recognize, you know what? I have to kind of rely on someone else for it to go well with me. And it creates a whole new way of looking at things. And this is hard because we live in a culture, like part of our sin nature, obviously, is us desiring to be God, which is selfishness, all that. So within us, kind of our human sinfulness leads us away from gratitude. But now we live in a society that is completely geared to our selfishness, right? On ways that we cannot even imagine. And I was thinking about this the other day. I didn't bring once the phone came around, the modern phone, that thing, if you look at it and you open it up and you start swiping, what is the one common denominator in that phone? It is there to focus on you. It's what I want. It's how quickly I want it, when I want it, how I want it. I can do all of that right here now. It used to, there was a little bit, we didn't have the ability to control our lives quite as much in the past. We have more ability now, and they know that. Right? Social media knows that. So it is geared intentionally to get you addicted. And that was okay when social media, you had to access, and most people in here, but there's a few in here that don't know. Used to, you had to get on social media by going to the computer, turning it on and hearing, right? Used to that happen, right? And it took some effort. And so you could get on that because social media really took off in about 2004. And so that's my AOL comparison. It actually probably was already gone, but it was funny. So, you had 2004, you have Facebook, all this stuff. It's not until 2007 that the iPhone comes out. And now social media is with you all the time, 24 hours a day. Right? And especially we've seen how that goes. Just something as simple as used to, and I'm not a huge music person, but I listen to music, and especially whenever you're going to a Ranger game with a car full of girls, you listen to music and you listen to it very loud. And I was thinking, I remember used to, the way that you listen to music is you had to listen to a radio station. And that radio station only played one genre of music generally. And you could listen for an hour And there may be only one song played that you actually like. And you had to listen for the rest of the time, and you just listen, you're like, this is a bad song. Oh well. Now, our society has created it to where you never have to listen to a song that you don't like. You just skip it. It's all about you. Like, these are subtle little things, I know, but it's important for us to all remember because we're all caught up in it, right? It's impacting all of us. Right? We have become addicted to comfort and to ease, right? And that's a dangerous place to be when the spiritual battle starts to ramp up. Because who wants to give up their comfort? I don't. Right? I love going and watching a baseball game in an air-conditioned stadium. Right? But we like comfort. We like that. And our society, though, has turned that to where we seek that. That has, in some ways, has become an idol. Right? And I think it's vital because a lot of times we read this stuff in the Old Testament and we read it and we're like, I've been to church for years and years and years. I don't follow any other idols. Be careful. All of society is trying to get you to follow other idols. It's just, most of you probably, don't have a little golden calf that you bow down to before you go to bed. If you do, let's talk. That's a problem, right? But idols are much subtler and more dangerous than that, especially in our day and time. So it's important. I am the Lord your God. He is God. We have this idea of gratitude because we're recognizing we need God, right? He's the one who has brought us out of slavery. He's the one who has given us new life. And then verse 7, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an image in the form of anything in heaven above or on earth beneath or in the waters below. You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sin of their parents to the third and fourth generation of those who hate me, but showing love to 1,000 generations of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. All right, so all of those are about recognizing who God is, right? And putting him in his rightful place. And, it starts off, you shall have no other gods before me. Again, just reiterating that. And then you shall not create an image to acknowledge these other gods, right? And this is some, talk about things that you never thought that you would preach about. We live in a time where it's very interesting times, and we need to be aware of what's happening, because there are basically only two religions or belief systems in the world. It's belief in the God of Scripture or belief in a secular created God that has many different forms. It has many different isms of socialisms, Marxisms, communisms, those become gods in themselves. It's a battling religions of worldviews, and it's either God of the Bible or something else, right? And it is easy to see how things start to get created and elevated to try to overtake God. We saw this quite a bit over the last few years with the elevation of science, right? Science easily becomes an idol because, look how smart we're getting. Look how ingenious we're getting. Look at all the problems that we can solve on our own. And pretty soon you start thinking, well, do we really need God? We're handling things pretty well, right? Which is a complete lie, but you can convince yourself of anything, right? And we live in a time where there are going to be new idols that are presented in new clothing. And we need to be aware of it. Just real quickly, I could really dive into this. But we talked about the phone. There is new technology that is coming that is going to cause mass confusion and chaos in our society. Everyone's heard the term artificial intelligence, and you think of it as Siri, right? You talk to Siri, and then Siri talks back. That is very rudimentary. We're talking about things moving beyond what we can imagine. And I say this, and you may laugh and stuff. All of us in here will be impacted by it. Most of us, within a few years, it's very possible you will have a digital assistant that will do everything for you, right? Which, again, what is that pressuring? It's making everything about who? About you. And so this digital assistant, it's not that it just shows you the right website to go to. Like it's crazy. You start reading some of the stuff. And so what is happening is interesting. We are creating something that is actually going to be able to then create. That's only happened once before, when God, the creator, who was not created, who has always been, created us and gave us certain limited creative capabilities. And because we don't acknowledge that, we create other gods. Right? And we follow other gods. Well, now we're creating AI, we're creating things like this that is going to be able to interact, that is going to actually be more powerful than us in some ways. Do you not think that very soon that there are not going to be groups that are worshiping technology? Of course there will be. And I don't say this to scare you to death. Because guess what? Just rest in the Lord. It's going to be okay. But be aware, because we can get caught up into this as well. And we need to be speaking truth into a society that starts to find God in something else. Right? And I mean, we're going to start having conversations about, is this life? Right? Right now, I was talking to Wes. If you're on Snapchat, you have your own AI bot that you can just have a conversation with. Right? Do you not think that at some point, very soon, people are going to start questioning, wait, if that thing can have conversation with me and can reason and can show me affection and can encourage me when I'm having a bad day, how is that not life? Like we have over half the people in this country that believes when something, you can hear a heartbeat in something, that it's still okay to terminate it because it's not life. Do you not think we're going to have some struggles with this? Of course we are. Guess what? What God said, this would have been longer than 2,000 years ago, is the answer for us today as we deal with these modern day problems. Back then, it was creating a golden calf. Today, there's a golden bull in Wall Street, but let's move past that. Today, it's AI, it's technology. It's all the same principle of anything that can move us from acknowledging that God is God and we are not. That gives us the ability to put an idol is anything that gives us the opportunity to put ourselves in God's place. And we can do that by creating the idol or by bypassing it all and saying, you know what, I am smarter than everyone else. I am an atheist. And so I just live my own truth. Okay, have fun with that. Okay? That is where we are as a society. And so God says, you shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make yourself an image. And then he says, for I am the Lord your God. I am a jealous God. And it says, punishing the children from this generation to the next generation. And we hear that, that's mean. But what is he really saying? What happened to this group right here? There was a generation of people who did not disobey God, that had to wander for 30 years. They were born in the wilderness, so they're paying those prices, right? That's what that's saying. is once one generation lets go of the rope and starts to not to follow God, it just leads to further and further decay until there's revival. Right? That's what God is saying. And he doesn't want that to happen. He says, you shall not misuse the name of the Lord your God. And this is interesting. For the Lord your God will not hold anyone guiltless who misuses his name. Oh, that's a big addition right there, right? You can't be forgiven in a sense, right? Well, what's he talking about? You can forgive murder, you can forgive adultery, because he doesn't add that addendum on any of the others, right? Well, it's not just using the Lord's name in vain, like in language. I don't think God wants you to do that either, by the way. But that's not what he's talking about. You're not condemned because you slip up and say OMG, right? It's much bigger than that. If you do evil in the name of God, that is heavy. And God, that is abhorrent to God. And how many times have we seen that? We have seen how things are worse when you do evil in the name of God than just doing evil. We see why God emphasized this. So I'm going to stop right there. I rambled too much. But as we move forward into this uncertain time, it is uncertain. But guess what? It's not really new. It's just new idols. That's what it is. And it doesn't make sense to us, and it's a little scary. But the answer is very simple. To go back, to take a deep breath, and say, there is only one God. And I worship him and him alone. I don't listen to all this other garbage that is out there. And I set my eyes on following him. Because he is God and I am not God. And I will not create anything so that I can be a pretend God either. Make that commitment each and every day. So even as the world gets crazy around you, you turn your eyes to him. Because he is the one who has given you new life. He is the one who has freed you. And we are no longer slaves because of what Christ has done for us. Let's